Camrim Draystone, capital city. What am I going to do? Gabriel Draymore asked himself the same question as sleep deprivation began to creep into the edges of his senses. He had been awake for 3 entire days. Even with his implants and augmentations, he was starting to reach the limits of what he was capable of withstanding. Never in his life had he ever needed to stay awake for longer than a whole standard day cycle. But that was, in all honesty, the least of his worries. With his heightened metabolism, he could stave off the need to eat for just as long without issues before his body started to protest. But that also meant that his caloric intake and nutritional necessities couldn't be ignored indefinitely without serious consequences. Water was, thankfully, readily available, and while finding ways to eat wasn't difficult, it certainly left much to be desired, mainly speaking in the flavor department. He had to rely on standard and readily available commoner-grade rations that were, to put it mildly, some of the most awful things his taste buds had endured, to the point he felt physically assaulted by the interesting flavors alone. Puzzlingly, that wasn't the worst part, as the texture proudly came to claim that crown. He could only describe it as stringy, chewy, and difficult to swallow. He didn't know what steps Peterson's plan would need to follow after the escape from the palace, but he prepared commoner clothes in order to mingle among them as he'd mentioned. The clothes felt coarse and irritated his skin, but it was certainly better than standing out with his high-quality suit. The shoes were simple and a little worn. Common synth socks warmed his feet. His pants were brown and rugged, his shirt was gray with the logo of a rock being split in two by a hammer. He wore a thick black jacket with a hoodie and sunglasses that hid his eyes. It was meant to be nothing more than a temporary disguise. Not anymore. He discarded one of his favorite suits and left the hoverbike behind. The idea of selling or using them as a bargaining chip crossed his mind, but he discarded it a moment later. Leaving a trail, no matter how inconsequential in his mind, would only work against him at some point. No doubt his father would be contacted and informed about his escape within hours at best. Nowhere near enough time for him to get any significant head start if there was any hope of success. 1 hour after his escape, an emergency broadcast erupted throughout the Draystone. By order of his grandmother, Dinah Hansenik, all departures from Camrim would be halted, and any incoming cargo would be detained in orbit for further inspection before it could land. The excuse was believable. Arabian agents had been detected on Camrim and were being hunted down, with Draystone receiving the heaviest deployment of police, militia, and guard forces, with army elements providing support. With his main route of escape cut off, he had been forced to keep moving across dark alleys and the underbelly of Draystone, where security wouldn't be so tight and cameras and drones would be less frequent. Partially, he thanked his father for blocking his ability to access networks. Otherwise, his grandmother's forces would detect him the moment he made a connection. Buying a regular data pad and hiding in the darkest corner of a bar, he used it to inform himself about the current state of politics. He nearly crushed his data pad out of pure frustration. He couldn't access the detailed military reports, but he could discern just how dire the situation truly was. The Callan, Astor, and Winfield territories were, essentially, fully blockaded at all strategic points of interest. The bulk of Draymore loyalist forces were dedicated to such an endeavor. There were sporadic skirmishes across all fronts, but the prince's loyalists were at a clear disadvantage. Furthermore, with House Anderson pledging itself to his father's treasonous coup, House Valto was now surrounded, overwhelmed. Their small but valiant efforts of resistance were rendered nearly obsolete. That only left Houses Lintar and Finnegan as the prince's only true available fighting forces, but House Lintar was notoriously weak, and House Wonder would keep them at bay easily. House Finnegan had never focused on military strength, but rather in medical and technological development and research above all, but had, so far, managed to repel Draymore forces and become a rallying point for any available forces loyal to his cousin, the prince. It filled his heart with even more anger directed at Duke Oscar and Duchess Sylvia. With the clear and outspoken support of any of them, his father's ambitions would certainly crumble around him. It wouldn't be easy. Duke Cornelius Draymore was not a man known for admitting surrender unless it benefited him somehow. He doubted his father would give in to defeat at all. Regardless, seeing the procession on Matcha elevated his mood as anger was about to take over his senses. His prince was safe and alive, standing tall, proud, dignified, and resolute to stop the traitors who opposed his ascension. The beacon that united the principality was joined by one of his royal sisters. Fortune was kind to him in allowing Clara to join his side. His anguish and pain were great for not being able to be there with his cousins in defiance of his traitor of a father. A smile formed on his lips when he saw the reports on the liberation of Hastrung and the victory Redford had achieved, coupled with the assault on the gallant venture by one Wyatt Staples. He couldn't quite make up his mind on what the man really was, but it didn't matter. He was loyal to the prince. That's all that mattered to him. It was thanks to his hand that a lone wolf was now outside his father's reach, and a great humiliation was dealt to both House Centaur and the Duke in equal measure. Despite those small victories, however, the traitors were hardly rattled from their position of strength with the pledge of House Anderson. He didn't believe for a moment that his cousin would execute an heir apparent in such cold blood, less so that Redford wouldn't object to it, or be the one holding the blade, as it were. He'd found all that 2 days ago. For 2 days, he'd kept moving constantly, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. His grandmother's forces were moving quickly but methodically, swarming the city from its outer edges and going through sector by sector in search of him. He loved his grandmother. The ancient woman was wise, kind, and preferred to spend her days in tranquility and silence. Even after his mother died, she never lost her composure, but she distanced herself from them amicably. Yet he wouldn't go to her. The thought never crossed his mind. Kind she was, but not placid. She was a dangerous woman in her own right. Capable, intelligent, and focused. Just because he was her grandson didn't mean she would let him go or protect him from his father. She was loyal to House Draymore and the Principality in that order. She wasn't a traitor in his mind. Rather, she was merely doing her duty to her duke. Gabriel sank into his seat as something that passed as music rumbled against his ears. He'd heard worse. What am I going to do? He asked himself again. You can start by ordering something this time, proclaimed a feminine, bored voice to his right. Glancing at the relatively small, brown-haired woman wearing plain clothes, an earpiece, and holding a small datapad, Gabriel remembered where he was. Another commoner bar that stank of cheap drinks. Water, and something to eat, he replied. The woman raised an eyebrow. You hit rock bottom, didn't you? More or less, he replied, though he wanted nothing more than to be left alone. The woman chuckled. Seen many like you over the years, pal. Here, I'll get you a grilled tanshi steak with steamed potatoes. That'll hit the spot. I'll leave you to your brooding now. Gabriel watched as the woman tapped her pad a few times and then walked away. For the first time since he entered, he looked around the bar. The decorations were less than quaint, to put it mildly. No style or elegance. They were there just to fill up space without any semblance of order. The paint job was nicely done, at least, but the colors were boorish and opaque. Small cleaning drones occasionally swept the floors and tables, uninterrupted by the other patrons of the establishment. At the far corner, a couple was busy locking lips. 2 tables over, a trio of teenagers were laughing as they drank, likely wasting the fruits of their labor as if it were a cause for celebration. Beyond them, another lonely figure quietly ate a bowl of something he couldn't identify. Lastly, a group of 4 rugged men and women was engaged in quiet discussion, slowly eating their meals and sipping their cheap liquor. Commoners, he thought, not with disdain, but mere resignation and not a small amount of irritation. The Principality was fighting itself all around them. The threat of a civil war breaking out was real. And yet, the simple-minded commoners were either too enraptured by their own tiny, insignificant squabbles, or they simply didn't care. Either option was detestable, though he had to admit a small part of him felt envious. To live in such ignorance, short-sightedness, and simple-minded stubbornness had to be, if nothing else, liberating in its own unique, awful way. A small pang of pain throbbed in his head, but it passed quickly. Yet another small reminder that his time was running short. He first needed to find a way to secure his passage off-world. There would be biometric and gene identification processes along the way to board any theoretical ship. Who would dare smuggle him with the risks so high? He could use his authority to force a merchant ship or commoners to secure his escape, but that had its own problems. They would obey him, of course, if they believed he was Gabriel Draymore to begin with, and not a dreaded Arabian agent. He'd be turned over for no doubt an ample recompense before he could do anything else. In their place, he concluded, he would do the same. Who would believe that the son of Duke Cornelius Draymore was not only in front of them, but demanding transportation off-world? Not even the most witless of commoners would obey unconditionally such demands. How to hide his identity enough to elude security systems, bypass biometric scanners, and board a ship successfully were the problems he was currently facing. But they were far from the only ones. His conviction would not be broken by mere insipid food and the temporary deprivation of what he'd grown accustomed to being part of his daily life. His biggest problem was far more pressing. Where would he go in the hypothetical case he left Camrim? Peterson had urged him to go to his aunt, Duchess Sylvia Emerald, first, and if he couldn't, seek refuge in a neutral territory. Bless his heart, but there was a reason the head chef had never ventured into politics or sought to further his position within his own house. Going to Emerald territory made sense. Under the protection of his aunt, he would remain safely away from his father's clutches. But that was only if Duchess Sylvia was willing to grant him her protection. Furthermore, he wouldn't be able to chant for his cousin's cause or showcase his support openly without serious ramifications and likely costing him any theoretical protection the Duchess bestowed upon him. In all likelihood, he'd be trading one gilded cage for another. And that was presuming Duchess Sylvia wouldn't simply return him to his father herself to prevent an altercation from taking place. Worse yet, her indecisiveness and lack of support toward the prince made her a liability that he simply couldn't put his trust in. So he discarded the option of seeking his aunt's protection. But why go to her in the first place? Kalan territory bordered Draymore territory. He could find passage in a civilian-grade ship and join Kalan forces. However, the problems immediately became apparent. Firstly, Kalan territory was under heavy blockade, which meant a heavy Draymore loyalist military presence. Secondly, if he managed to make contact with Kalan forces, what then? He wasn't a warrior, and his presence, if revealed, would only embolden forces under his father's banner to capture him. And thirdly, he wouldn't be able to go anywhere to support his prince. Heading directly onto Aster territory was another tempting option. Alas, it was not meant to be. The difficulties he faced in entering Kalan territory were magnified, depriving him of hope. Perhaps, in desperation, he would throw caution to the wind and head there regardless. But he wasn't that desperate. Not yet. To serve the principality and aid his cousin to the best of his abilities, he needed to remain focused on his objectives. That only left one true route for him to walk on: asylum in a neutral territory. Requesting asylum would put him in a similar position to choosing to go to Duchess Sylvia Emerald, minus the very real threat of being immediately handed over for the sake of maintaining relations. He could also move more openly to rally support for the prince's cause. A diplomat he wasn't, but he wasn't terrible at the role either. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could convince a great house to side with the prince. Oh, what a boon would that be, even if it were an unlikely outcome. But where to go? House Hillborough wouldn't grant him any asylum whatsoever. House Haste wouldn't either. They were too busy maintaining their duties against the Arabian Commonwealth to care much about who sat on the throne at any given moment. House Edgebank was a good option, but while not weak by any means in terms of military strength, its attention was focused inward. And House Duavani? With the exception of one other immediate house, that was his best option. House Duavani was renowned for its refinement in the pursuit of all forms of art, culinary delights, and thriving industries. Overall weak in military might, but not too terrible. His last option was House Arnav. Hardly an ideal first choice, House Arnav was one of the most powerful great houses across the Principality for a variety of reasons. Chief among them, of course, their efforts against the Arabian Commonwealth alongside Houses Hillborough and Haste. The Fifth Fleet was also present there, which granted House Arnav a great deal of autonomy and tangible power, enough to grant him refuge and welcome him as an honored guest. Not even his father or the honorless viper that was Tamarin Caiston would dare incite the fury of House Arnav. Yes, finding his way to House Arnav was his best option to escape his father and, from there, try to gain their favor or, at the very least, contact his cousin, the prince, from a safe position. It was a perfect plan, his only truly viable plan. A predictable plan, Gabriel muttered under his breath, and a joyless smirk spread across his lips. Rubbing his temples, the blond man felt despair grip his heart. Maybe I should loudly announce to the four winds my intentions so that everyone, commoner and noble alike, lay witness to the son of their Lord Regent rebel against him. Let everyone know that Gabriel Draymore stands against his treasonous father. The humiliation would be immeasurable. A small victory, nothing more. My best efforts are pathetic, he followed, ending with a disheartened chuckle. Long moments passed in silence, unable to conjure any coherent ideas. Have to say, pal, I've seen crematories with more cheerful dispositions than you, said the waitress as she placed a reddish-cooked steak with small steaming potatoes on a platter alongside a large glass of water with ice. "Excuse me, but I don't have the time to humor your musings. I've got much larger problems to focus on," Gabriel replied, nearly snapping at the plebeian woman. "That bad, huh?" she said, ending in a chuckle. Then, without waiting for an invitation, she pulled the chair next to him and sat down. "Hey, Sanso, taking my 15-minute break." "Don't pester the clients, Nancy!" the man standing behind the bar shouted back, to which Nancy, the waitress, replied with a raised middle finger. "So what's eating you up?" Nancy asked, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, go ahead and eat. You'll feel better with a full belly. Trust me." Gabriel could only stare as the exchange happened. No manners, brutally casual and vulgar, but with a sense of familiarity that felt so out of place yet fitting at the same time. A few moments later, the shock passed, and he sighed through his nose. "I would rather be alone if you wouldn't mind." "And leave you to your brooding?" "Nah, I've seen too many like you, pal. Groveling and dragging themselves across the floor only to waste away. Trust me, I've seen way too many already for a lifetime," Nancy replied, chuckling. "Betting by your size and the way you speak, you're a disgraced noble, ain't ya? Did you lose your knighthood?" Gabriel stared into the woman's eyes for a long, silent moment before the rather unappetizing smell of the steak compelled him to slice it and take a bite. It wasn't terrible, but that was all the praise he could give. He followed it with a potato and a hefty drink of water before he found his voice again. "In a sense, yes. I am disgraced beyond your wildest imagination, woman. I don't carry my last name anymore," Gabriel replied as he cut a second slice of meat. Nancy winced. "Exiled, huh? So you're from a lesser house, pal? Gotta admit, not many of your kind find their way here to the Revenant. I've heard all sorts of stories, you know? From idiots who lost it all to gambling, got cheated on, their noble masters kicked them out for one reason or another. Plenty of bastards are born that way, and many more stories I could write a book about it. If you're trying to comfort my aching soul, allow me to tell you that you're failing miserably," Gabriel replied, unamused. Nancy shrugged. "Just telling you things as they are. Besides, I have to entertain myself somehow. Thanks to those damn Arabians, we won't be seeing a lot of traffic until things return to normal. So here I am. You'll feel better after you spill what's bothering you. Trust me. It always works, most of the time." Swallowing another portion of his meal, Gabriel was about to reject the burdensome woman's offer as nothing more than an annoyance when her last words registered in his mind. He was a man of laws, bureaucracy, administrative rules, regulations, and leadership. He based every decision he made on theoretical problems and then apply a practical and empirical solution. He was aware that he lacked creative thinking. He simply didn't have any talent for it. He was rigid and straightforward, blunt, predictable. Theoretical. If I continue to act as I always do, I will be found and captured. I will fail my prince and end up in a worse position than I am in now. Practical, find another solution, Gabriel thought before turning to Nancy. "There's nothing much to explain," he began. "I was exiled, and I have nothing left except the clothes I'm wearing, some credits, and the desire to leave Cameron behind me. But I don't know what to do. I never expected my life to take this turn." "The blockade can't last for much longer," Nancy said. "Some ships and crews are starting to leave Draystone's spaceports. Shit time for a new life to begin, eh?" Gabriel narrowed his eyes. "Your optimism is boundless." "Someone has to," Nancy replied, shrugging. "So what are you good at? You look like you have some implants in you." "Administrative duties are my talent, though I do suppose my strength may be of use in physical labor," Gabriel replied. The waitress smiled. "With exosuits and drones to do the heavy lifting, your strength is welcome, but not much useful for a lot of things. But you say you have a brain in you, eh? You looking for work?" "As long as it gets me off Cameron and out of Draymore territory," Gabriel replied. "You're in luck," she said before turning to the table with the quartet. Hey, Ramon! Bring your ass here right now! I think I found your new numbers, master." Gabriel watched as the bulkiest man of the group, bald but with a rather imposing black beard, stood up. It didn't take long for the brown-eyed man wearing a patchy blue uniform with a torn-off logo to arrive at his table. His voice, however, wasn't as deep as he thought it would be. It was gruff, yes, but it lacked aggression. "This guy?" Ramon asked, pointing a thumb at Gabriel. "Yeah. He says he's good with the numbers and keeping papers in check. Says he'll do anything as long as he gets off Camrim, Nancy answered with a charming, playful smile. Ramon, unimpressed, turned to Gabriel. That so? Have you ever worked on anything related to a merchant freighter vessel? As long as I have access to the forms, I can fill out any documents you may need to conduct your business in an orderly, proper manner as the laws dictate, Gabriel replied. Ramon's expression shifted as his relaxed composure turned rigid and formal. Oh, excuse me, sir. I didn't realize you were a noble. Don't worry, Ramon. He's in exile, Nancy said, much to Ramon's immediate relief. So what do you think? Sir, will you be willing to work under a commoner? My ship isn't affiliated with any large merchant guild or flies under the protection of any corporation or house. We're largely independent, Ramon asked, visibly relaxed, but not entirely. Where are you headed? Gabriel asked. To Duovani territory. We were going to leave 2 days ago, but the inspections hit, you see. Our turn on the list comes tomorrow, and well, we're short one crew member, Ramon began to explain awkwardly. Timothy assaulted some guards, and well, he won't be leaving Camrim for a long while. We need someone to keep our numbers in check and fill out the forms. You could have an administrative AI do that for you, Gabriel replied instinctively. True, but they are expensive. We don't have that luxury. Better to have someone who can handle it, Ramon continued. Besides, it doesn't look like you got many options now, do you? You want to get off this rock. We want to get off this rock. We both win. Gabriel's eyes narrowed behind his glasses. What are you transporting? An assortment of luxury goods. Nothing illegal in our manifesto, except for a wee bit of smuggling, but hey, it ain't too bad either. No narcotics or dangerous stuff. Just some high-quality items for certain clients with finer tastes. You understand, right? Ramon reassured, stroking his beard. And after that's done? Gabriel asked. We find a new client or delivery to make. It ain't much, but is honest living out there in the inky black, Ramon replied, smiling. Mostly honest. In that case, I accept. Sadly, I don't have credentials anymore, said the blond man. Not to worry. We have forged IDs for such cases. Smuggling can sometimes be hazardous. Only sometimes, Ramon answered, then extended a hand. A moment later, he pulled it back. Apologies, sir. Gabriel contemplated his options for a second before extending his hand to the bearded man. Ramon took it with a firm squeeze before shaking them twice. Letting go, Ramon smiled. May I know your name, sir? Victor. My name is Victor. Just Victor, if you will, Gabriel answered. A pleasure, Victor, Ramon answered with a polite bow of his head. Will you join me so I can introduce you to the rest of the group? Will you be here in 2 hours? There's something I need to do first, Gabriel said before turning to Nancy. How much do I owe you for the meal? And do you know where I can dye my hair nearby? Camrim, Draystone, Capital City, 4th Spaceport. Aboard the merchant freighter Never Late, Gabriel Draymore allowed himself a moment of relief as he stared at the ceiling of his bunk bed. Ramon Shinetool was true to his word. With his new ID, Victor Halleck had been born. Getting past the inspection point was far easier than he could have imagined. Even with tight security, a single bribe in the right place was more than enough to expedite the process on an insignificant freighter. The excuse was that they were searching for Erebian agents when in reality they were searching for him. So logic dictated that he simply needed not to be him. Hiding himself behind the mask of a fake name was easy. But to hide his other prominent features? Simple. His blonde hair was quickly dyed brown. It wouldn't last more than a few weeks, but that was fine with him. Losing his sideburns hurt. He took great pride in them, but they were an acceptable sacrifice. And his eyes? It was a crude solution, but the contact lenses, a deep brown color, hid his intense green eyes. Sure, they wouldn't hold to any proper scanning protocol, but it proved enough to fool the guards conducting the simple visual inspection. He'd done it. He could hardly believe it, but he'd done it. He had escaped. He wasn't yet outside his father's grasp, but now he was one step closer. Gabriel vowed that Peterson's sacrifice and that of all those who helped him escape wouldn't be in vain. But first, he needed to sleep. Closing his eyes, darkness overtook his fatigued senses within moments. This is the end of Chapter 49. In the next chapter, we return back to Wyatt's storyline. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment below.